I'm serious today. I'm not messing around, okay? I want to talk about something I've been chewing over for a while, and something that honestly I would say this is probably one of the most practical things that has changed my life for the better. Like, I couldn't give you a more practical message than I will today. Like, just, I'm quite a, pie in the sky, like let's look at this theology about God, and then we kind of try and make it practical, and that's very, very doable. But this is going to be practical. This is going to be telling you some real practical things you can do in your life that will make your life infinitely better overnight. Okay? So, like, anyone want that, right? I want that. So, and I'm going to be hopefully listening to my own message. But Serena said at the end of worship, she said, God, help us see who you truly. There's something in us seeing who God is that will help us see who we are. That we will be more Christ-like as we realize who Christ is, right? Christ comes to reveal who God is. So when we see Jesus, we see the Father. So the beauty of gazing on Jesus and looking at Jesus is we see who we are in His image, in His likeness. And I don't know about you. Have you ever heard? Have you ever heard a sermon on judgment? Anyone ever heard sermons? Anyone ever heard Christians talking about judgment? Right? Anyone seen the Christians with the judgment signs? Right? Walking with the big billboards on the side of the road, or I don't know, right? We love judgment as Christians, right? And I grew up in quite a brethren, kind of reserved, conservative background in church, and we love judgment, right? We couldn't wait for Jesus to come down with His lightning bolts, We love judgment. But you know what I've come to realize is that God isn't that big into judgment, right? Have you ever read what Jesus had to say about judgment? It's really quite startling. So I want to just share a few verses, and I'm going to just start thinking about the topic of judgment. I'm going to talk about judgment. You would not have expected Phil Drysdale, the squeaky clean, grace, love person, to give you a sermon on judgment. I'm going to do that, but it might not go the way you think. So John 5:22 says, the Father, this is Jesus speaking, and he's addressing the topic of judgment. He says, the Father judges nobody, but has entrusted all judgment to me. So Jesus is saying, right, you think of God the Father as this big judge who's going to judge you one day. He's going to tell you, you did this right, you did that wrong, and it's this. And Jesus says, actually, the Father's not about that. That's my job. Jesus the Son. You're like, oh, okay, cool. We got that wrong, but Jesus the Son will judge us then. But later on, Jesus addresses us still. And so in John 12:47, He says, if anyone hears my words and doesn't keep them. Okay, so who's someone that hears what Jesus says and doesn't keep them? Like someone that's disobedient to Jesus, right? Probably all of us at times, right? If anyone hears my words and does not keep them, okay, these people are ready to be judged, right? They're going to be judged pretty bad, right? Because they didn't do the right thing. What does Jesus say? This is the person that's in charge of judging, Jesus. God the Father doesn't judge, I judge, Jesus. If anyone hears my words and does not keep them, I don't judge him. For I haven't come to judge, I've come to save. And that's Jesus, everything He had to say about judgment, actually, on the explicit topic of judgment. We'll look at a couple other things He says, but doesn't sound compatible with how I perceived God in judgment. I perceive God as like sitting there, flicking through my life, like playbook of the day, and going, ooh, he messed up there, to judge him for that. Ooh, he did well, give him some blessings for that. And Jesus goes, well, even if they listen to what I say and then completely disregard it and don't do it, I'm not going to judge them. My job's to save them. Huh. But you know what that makes me think? Is I'm thinking well, if God the Father isn't judging, and Jesus isn't judging, who's doing all the judging? Right? Maybe Holy Spirit? Yeah. Well, actually, John 16 tells us that isn't the Holy Spirit's job either, right? It says the Holy Spirit hasn't come to judge. So, the person that does the judging, you look at them in the mirror every day. We are incredible at judging. Really, really good at judging. Words can't describe. I could have a PhD doctorate in judging people. I am good at it. Judging myself, judging other people, I am good at judging. And Jesus addressed this as well, though, right? So Matthew 7, verse 1, He says, do not judge. Okay, so even though we're good at it, He's telling us not to judge as well. Right? Anyone want to be Christ-like? Anyone want to be like God? Do not judge. right? If they aren't judging, maybe we shouldn't either, right? So Jesus addresses it. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way that you judge others, you will be judged. And with the same measure you use, it will be measured to you. We love this topic, don't we? We love how many of you hear the topic, give and it will be given, press down, shaken together, overflow, right? We love to use that at the offering time, right? But it's not about money. It's about judgment, actually. I'll read it in Luke 6, 37, 38. It says, judge not, and you will not be judged. Condemn not, and you won't be condemned. Forgive, and you'll be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, it will be put into your lap. For with the measure you use it, the measure will be given back to you. But the whole topic, and the context of the verses before that, and the context of the verses after it, are about judgment. And what's he saying? And what's interesting is you say, well, don't judge or you'll be judged. If you judge, you'll be judged. Well, if Jesus isn't judging, and the Father isn't judging, who's judging us in response to our judgment? Ourselves. We set up the standard by which we'll be judged. That's a sobering thought. Right? Or it is for me. I don't know how well you judge or not. But I'm a really good judge, so I'm setting up a really good standard for me to be judged. And I don't know about you, I really struggle with this concept. I'm really good at judging. I'm just really, really good. I'm very quick at looking at someone else and going, ooh, maybe they did that for this reason or for that, or this is why they're doing that. Or I live evaluating why people are doing what they're doing. And it is the number one way to put a heaped burden on myself. And there's a big difference between judgment and observation. Okay? So, because I'm not saying it's bad to observe. So someone could do something, you can observe that they have done that. Right? So, I don't know, someone kills someone, you can observe, oh, that person killed someone. Right? I'm not saying that's judgmental. Right? If someone killed someone, that's not judgmental to go, oh, they killed someone. You've just observed it. When we step into judgment is when we go, why did they do it? The second we start questioning what's going on in someone else's head, we have stepped into judgment because we do not know what is going on in someone's head. We just don't know what's going on in their heads, right? You can only have a look at the fruit. You can't actually tell what's going on at the root issue, what's causing that fruit. So it's maybe healthy to look at fruit in people's lives and go, oh, something's going on there. But for us to suddenly presume that we know what's causing it and what's going on is the root of so many of our issues in our day-to-day lives. This is akin to a doctor going in for surgery when he hasn't even evaluated what's going on in the patient, right? It's like you go into the doctor and go, I've got a headache. And he goes, all right, let's get you in for brain surgery. And you're like, whoa, hold on, can we do some scans or something else, right? But this is what we do so often. Someone says something that was mean. And we immediately go, oh, they hate me, they think this about me, and this, and this, and this. And actually, it wasn't about you at all. They were just having a bad day, and they didn't think through what they said. And they really like you. But now you've created a whole world where that person hates you. Anyone done this before? I do this daily, right? I'm lucky if I only do it once daily, right? It's so easy, because we jump into someone else's head and we presume to know what they are thinking about us. So we can actually only know the fruit of what's going on externally, not what's going on internally. And even that, a one-off thing is probably not a great way to evaluate something. We can observe, oh, that person did this once, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we know everything about that person. We all make mistakes, right? So to judge someone just based on that is a whole bunch of issues as well, just to observe one mistake and go, oh, that's what that person's like. And so there's something we really need to dive into this. We really need to think about how do we interact with the people around us so that we don't step into judgment. I don't even, I've had so many examples. I've probably got 12 examples from last week of how this has affected me, But there's so many times. I'll give you a couple of examples that are just silly, but they're so real. There was a time when I was quite young, probably like late teens, so like 18, 19 or so. I was going to this church, and And I was a passionate Christian. I was going to change the world, and I was helping out with the youth, but I really wanted the pastors to like me and all the influential people in the church to think I was great, right? Because we all do that as well, for whatever reason. Right? But I was like, oh, I really want the pastors to like me. And, me and the pastor talked occasionally, but it was a big church, about 500-600 people. And so one Sunday, I was chatting to my friends in the aisle, in the middle of all the chairs, and the pastor comes in at the back door, and he walks down the aisle, and I turn around and go, oh, hey, Pastor Bob. I won't say his real name, right? No. Don't worry, it's judgmental. It's all about me anyway. It's not about him. Hey, Pastor Bob, how are you doing? And he just walks right past me. He looks at me and just keeps going. And I'm like, oh, right? I mean, that was right in the heart, that one. Oh, that hurt, right? The pastor just totally, looked at me, heard me, and then just ignored me entirely and walks on. And I'm like, oh, ouch, right? So he gets up after, worship, and he does a sermon, and he does all sorts of stuff. He's doing ministry with people afterwards. The whole service, right? I can't even get into worship. I'm sitting there thinking, this guy's just a punk. Yeah, I'm just some kid, but who does this guy think he is? You just ignore me, blah, 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 right? And I'm getting upset, really upset. And then he's preaching, and I can't remember what he was preaching about because I'm too angry about it, right? But he's probably preaching something, and I'm thinking, who are you to talk, right? Love people, you don't even say hi, or whatever, right? I'm getting upset with this guy. And then he comes down and he's ministering to people, and he's like, oh yeah, well, it's okay to minister to them, but you're not going to hang out and chat to me, or I'm getting really, really upset. And so I'm talking to my friends at the end of the service, probably not even really in there, because this is really hurting me, right? I was quite a broken person. I don't know, who's not broken, right? I mean, whatever. We're all on that journey of figuring out the stuff that's going on. But at this point, I was especially broken, right? I've got a whole other level of broken. And so I'm chatting to my friends or whatever, and next thing I hear, I feel is a tap on my shoulder. I turn around and it's Pastor Bob, right? And he says, hey, Phil. He's like, I'm really sorry, I completely ignored you this morning. He's like, I didn't even realize you'd said hi until I was sitting on the front row. He's like, I have been up all night with one of the people in our church who's dying, with their family at the hospital. I've been up the whole night. I've slept 2 hours. I woke up. I had to get straight here to preach a message. My associate pastor isn't here. He's on holiday. I have just been frazzled. He's like, I'm really sorry. I hope you didn't think I was rude. And I'm sitting thinking, oh, I really did. Now I feel terrible, right? And now I feel like the worst human being in the world, right? What did I do? I judged. I presumed to step into his mind. And yeah, absolutely, he was rude, he ignored me or whatever, right? That's not necessarily rude. But I presume to know why he did that. Because he doesn't think much of me, or he's so high and mighty, or whatever, right? We can all create some good reasons. And what I do is, whenever, anytime I judge someone else, I create a world that I have to live in. And it's not real. Even if I'm right, it's not real. Me presuming what's going on in your head only creates a reality that I have to live in that isn't real. Some of you might know, a couple of years ago, I used to be married. My wife left me quite kind of abruptly, out of nowhere. Didn't really want that to happen, but it did. It wasn't fun. And I went through a process of really fighting that, really going, come on, we can work on things, we can work through things, I want this to work. We went to therapy, she just didn't engage with that. It was really tough for me, really hard process to go through, as I'm sure some of you can imagine. I'm sure all of you know people that have gone through divorce, maybe some of you have gone through that. It's not a fun process, And it was really tough for me. And one of the hardest parts in hindsight, the reason it became so hard for me in hindsight is that I spent the majority of that process judging them. Because when Sarah left, she had said, well, this is why I don't think it's going to work. And I would hear that, it would come in one ear, and it would immediately go out the other ear. And instead, I would judge what was going on. And I would say, oh, she doesn't want to be with me because of this, because of that, because I'm like this, because this isn't good enough, because she wants this, or what. And I created 110 different reasons why Sarah was leaving, and it crushed me. It really did. I went through such a season of just real tough stuff, feeling inadequate, feeling broken, trying to work on stuff, all this different stuff. And at a certain point, this is when God started to speak to me about judgment, actually, in this kind of season. And God just said, Phil, you're judging Sarah. Maybe take her at her word. And so I was like really challenged by that. I kind of processed a bit, like, what is he talking about? And I ended up talking to Sarah. We were in different countries at this point, and she was making it very hard to be married, right? And so she's about 2,500 miles away. So we're Skyping. I was like, can I just Skype? I don't want to fight about this. I don't want to try and make it work or anything like that. I just want to talk. And so she was very gracious and said yes. And I said, I'm really sorry, but I've been judging you. And actually, I haven't even heard properly where you're coming from, because I've been living in my own reality of why you don't want to be here. And I was like, I don't want to argue, and I don't want to even counter what you say, but what I would love to do is just have you share with me what's going on in your heart and in your mind, and what's your journey been like in this. And I want whatever I feel, whatever I think, to be completely irrelevant in this conversation. I just want to know what's going on in here for you. And she shared, and she talked, and it didn't fix the situation. We're not married, but immediately, within minutes, this weight was on my shoulders. And I just listened to what was going on, and I was like, I can't do anything about these things. This isn't about me. What's going on in her head, it's actually not stuff that I can deal with or fix or whatever. And I'm like, I have been putting a huge burden on myself, and beating myself up, and trying to change things that she didn't even care about, right? And I created this whole world because I presumed to know what was in another person's mind. You know what's really interesting is what you presume to be in someone else's mind, do you know what it is? 9 times out of 10, it's what's in your mind. And it's a funny adage, I've written it down somewhere, so I'll probably forget. I can't remember who said this, but they said, you don't think like I think, but I think you do. Right? Every person around you does not think like you think. They've had a different upbringing. They've been brought up in a different family. They've had different experiences. They've worked in different environments. They may be from different states, countries. These people, everyone around you has a different way of life that they've been brought up in. And yet we presume to think that they're thinking exactly the same way that we are. And we have different wounds. We've got different hurts. We've got different stuff going on. We have a different journey with God. Like, it's kind of crazy to think that people are thinking the same way we do. But we do. And so this is why actually judgment is so dangerous, is that when I judge you, 999,000 out of a million times, I'm going to be wrong. Because I'm presuming that you're thinking like me, and you're not. I just don't know the way you think. I don't know the way you process. And the more time we spend with people and we talk to them and dialogue with them, I know you a bit more, I understand a bit more of how you think, and things like that, and that's great. And that helps us observe more accurately. But there still usually is a disconnect where you need to start talking to people about what's going on in here. But we love to create these worlds, don't we? We love to over-evaluate, get in someone else's mind and go, what is going on? The thing about judgment is the root cause of all suffering in the world. Not the root cause of all pain, but the root cause of all suffering. I can't remember who said this either. It's either Ray Edwards or maybe James Richards. I don't know. Who said that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. We've all been through stuff that hurts, right? I mean, all of us have had pain, right? I mean, I imagine the youngest people in this room, 2 years old, have probably experienced pain. Younger, right? I mean, we all go through stuff that hurts. That's unavoidable in life. The suffering happens when we start asking the question, why? When we start over-evaluating, we start diving deep, and we start giving reason to the pain. We just don't have the capacity to answer that question. Why? We don't. When something happens that is external to you, when we cause our own pain, maybe we can answer some of the whys. But even then, I don't think many of us are that self-aware. We sometimes need other people to give us some feedback. We need to ask God. Like, realistically, we're not even that self-aware that we know what's going on inside us most of the time. Never mind what's going on in our spouse or our friend or whatever, our colleague. And we're so selfish, aren't we, really, as humans? You know, and absolutely, in Christ, I'm a selfless being, and I'm learning to walk that out. I'm learning to embrace that reality and step forward in it. But the truth is, we're all the star in our own show, aren't we? Right? There's that famous thing where, like, there's a condition you can have where you don't connect with that, and you actually see yourself as just like a random person in the midst of the world. And that's like, I think, like one in like millions of people have that. Everyone else, you are the absolute epicenter of the universe. And everyone else is like, you know, like a B-class actor that just happens to be in your show, right? Maybe apart from maybe like spouse and your kids or something, right? But they're not as important as you either, right? Because the world revolves around me, because I see it from my perspective. I observe it from my perspective. I judge it from my perspective. And this is why every time we judge, we're wrong. Because whilst I'm the center of the show, Dan over there is the center of his show. And Serena's the center of her show. And so I don't know what's going on here. And you know what's interesting is, you know, most of the things that anyone has ever done to you, this is a problem with judging. I judge that pastor, I judge Sarah, I judge whatever. Whenever you judge, you make it about you because the world revolves around you. Do you want to know something? 99% of the things that people do in their lives, they didn't even think about you. Sorry. It's just true. And this is the people closest to you. Most of the time, they just do what they do because they do it. They thought about it themselves and they went, oh, I'll do that. And so when we judge, we make it, oh, that was all about me, right? So that pastor walking down a thing, he's obviously got some sort of vendetta against me. Rather than, actually, that pastor is his own world, and he's just had a rough day, and that's the way it is. When my spouse said that snappily at me, it was obviously because she's thinking about me the whole day and thinking this is what's wrong with me, and it's just come out of that. Rather than, she might have just like got out of the bed the wrong side. I don't know, right? Or just got out of work and someone was mean to her at work. And she judged that, and now I'm judging her for it, right? And all the way, it was nothing to do with me. I think this is one of the keys to ceasing to judge, is to recognize that other people are not thinking about you 24/7. And you want to know one of the biggest evidences of that is that we think they are. Right? The fact that we're judging people as though they're thinking about me the whole time just shows how selfish we all are. Right? The fact that I think that probably means that they're over here thinking that we're thinking about them the whole time, right? Like, this is just the way, because we're living in our own worlds. And you know what? I'm not saying this is even a bad thing. I'm just saying this is the way it is, right? You live in your head, in your life, and that's a good thing, right? I don't want to live anyone else's life. My life is pretty great. Or take, right? But we have to recognize that. We have to, on some level, be self-aware enough to know, I'm obsessed with me. And I judge what other people do based on how it affects me, on what I'm thinking, on the way I think. But so does everyone else. I have to extend that person grace to realize that they're probably in their own world. 99 of the decisions out of 100 they make have nothing to do with me. They weren't even thinking about me. You know, almost every problem you have with other people is your problem. That's a real horrible truth I don't really like. It's Chris' responsibility in my corner, right? Don't you hate it when, like, you read the scriptures and you go, oh, I'm responsible for my own life, right? You hate it when it says things like, oh, you can't get offended. And it's like, well, I don't want to be offended, right? Because they offended me. No, they didn't. You chose to be offended by what they did. No, I didn't, Jesus. They offended me, right? I hate stuff like that. You're not allowed to be offended, but I want to be. Because if it's their problem, that makes me high and mighty, perfectly great. I don't have to evaluate any of the stuff going on in here. I can just point the finger and go, you're messed up. You need to fix what you're doing. You offended me. Stop it. The way you choose to live your life, etc., etc., etc. The way you speak to me, the way you do this, the way you do that. Sure, that might all be really messed up and wrong, but guess what? It's not your problem. Your problem is choosing to care. I'm not saying we don't care about other people or care about how they interact with us. We can create boundaries. We can do a whole bunch of good stuff, but we have to recognize it's my responsibility to not make that the end of the world. Same with our situations, right? I mean, we have no control, right? So we like to think we can control other people, and maybe on a good day we can somehow manage to manipulate someone into doing something, right? Probably not a healthy thing to do, right? But, you know, on some level, maybe you can control people. You can't control your circumstances, though. I mean, again, maybe a few circumstances here and there, but the majority of people around you in your life, you have no control over what they do. You just don't have control over what they're going to do to you. So, if you're going to have a problem every time someone does something mean to you, that's a problem. Because there's a lot of people you're going to meet on a day-to-day basis that are going to be mean, that are going to be standoffish, that are going to say something unkind, that are not going to extend grace to you and be loving. And if that's an issue for you, you've got a really big issue. You're going to have to figure out, how do I, over here, internally, process that stuff and deal with that stuff. Same with situations, right? You can't control if your sister gets cancer. You can't. You can't control if that loved one dies. You can't control if your kid gets kicked out of school for misbehaving. You can't control these things. You just can't. You can't control if there's a natural disaster and swallows up, New Hampshire. I don't know, that's very unlikely, right? But you can't control it. So what are you going to do in that situation? Because our default is to become a victim, honestly. I know it is for me. Our default is to, wow, I can't control that, so nothing I can do, and that's just the way it is, and woe is me. Well, maybe we could choose to be powerful in that situation. And we can recognize there's certain things in our life we can't change, absolutely. But there's a lot of things we can change. There's the whole example of people that would be getting killed for their faith. And they'd line up Christians and they'd just shoot them one by one by one. And they would say, renounce Christ. And they'd be like, no. And they'd get shot. And it's like, I still have a choice in that moment. That's amazing, right? So I think one of those that were martyred made an amazing statement at their death. And they basically said, I have no freedom at all except to choose to remain faithful to Jesus. That's the only freedom I have, and that's the last freedom they had, because they were shot in the back of the head. I mean, that's pretty intense, right? But even in that moment, they go, nope, I'm in control of my life. You've got me on my knees, you're meant to kill me. I mean, it's not a long life he's got control of either, right? But I'm in control of my life. And the thing is, regardless of where you find yourself, there are elements of your life that you can control. I can control how I respond to every situation I find myself in. Every time. And the number one thing that, in my opinion, it's really changed my life, certainly, and I think it has the power to transform our lives, is our ability to control whether we will choose to judge or choose to observe. And observing's healthy. You get home from a long day at work and your husband bites your head off, right? Just you can choose whether you're going to observe that and be like, oh wow, something's wrong here, right? And we know that something's not good because that's not what you're usually like. And then we can choose whether we go, oh, let's take one more step and presume why it is. Oh, because he doesn't like me, or because I'm whatever, this, Y, X, Y, or Z, because this happened. Or we can go, actually, maybe I won't take that step, and I'll just go, hey, what's happened today? For me, it feels like you're a bit off today. Totally understand that. We all have bad days, but do you want to talk about that? Do you want to talk about something? What's going on? I want to know. I know for me, you know what? The amount of times I have that conversation is pretty rare. It's becoming a lot more often. Most of the time, I'll get really upset, I'll wander off into my bedroom and lock the door or something and just... Right? Because that's a healthy response. Right? Locking yourself in a room, pretending to know what they are doing and what they're thinking, and getting really upset with them. 112 tissues in pocket here, apparently. It's great. Sorry. I'm fighting a bit of a cold right now, so... The number one way to stop judging people is to communicate. whenever you find yourself thinking that person is doing this because, or this is what's going on inside them, you've stepped into judgment. And it happens. It does happen. I mean, we've got a lot of training in this. I know some of you guys have been doing this for decades. I've been doing it for a few decades at least. Like, we're good at this. So it's breaking a habit, isn't it? But communication is what does it. The second we go, oh, I'm in this zone, you take a step back. You go, okay, what am I making up here and what have I actually observed? And refusing to live in that world that you've just made. And going, actually, I'm not going to go there. I'm going to live my life as though everything that I can observe is true. Nothing more. If I need more information than that, because sometimes that's enough. Sometimes it's enough to step out of judgment and go, I'm just not going to go there. You know, my spouse said they're fine. I'm going to take them at their words. And you know what? This is a good exercise in relationships anyway. To just be like, hey, from now on, you're going to have to actually let me know what's going on in here because I'm not going to pretend to know. Because I'm not going to do that. I refuse to judge because it creates a real unhealthy dynamic in our relationship. So, when you're acting crazy, and I say, what's going on? And you say, I'm fine, I'm going to presume you're fine. That's not fun. Right? Because we don't want that. We want you to know what's inside our heads. And I'm not going to do anything. Sorry. So now you have the thing of, whatever you tell me, I'm going to take you at your words. And all of a sudden, communication starts opening up real quickly. Because actually, I want you to know that I'm not okay. I'm not fine. But most of the time, honestly, you don't even need to communicate. Just take a step back and go, I'm going to take you at your words. I'm not allowing myself to judge. I'm not allowing myself to go to that place. And if you are finding yourself going to that place, that's when you do need to communicate. If you're going to consistently go into that, she probably thinks this. Oh, he's probably thinking this. He's doing it because of this. And that's an immediate thing, a warning sign that you're trying to fill in gaps that you need. You need those gaps filled. And we all do, right? We all need information. It's nothing worse than not knowing what's going on in someone, especially if it's a loved person or someone that's important or someone you have to do life together with all the time, like a coworker or something. I want to know what's going on. I want to know why you're a bit standoffish with me. I'm going to communicate. And oftentimes, you know how it starts, that communication? With a sorry. Most of the times it has to start with, hey, I'm really, really sorry, but I've been presuming, I've felt recently that you've been a bit off with me, and I've gone totally in my own head about it, and I've presumed a whole bunch of stuff that probably isn't even right. And if it is, that's okay, we can talk about it, but I would really like to know from your side of this story what's going on, so that we can try and fix this connection, this relationship. This is not the ministry of Jesus. It's not the ministry of God, the Father. It's not the ministry of the Holy Spirit. You know, the Holy Spirit's ministry is He leads us, but He never leads us to critique others and find fault. Right? And how often do we judge people when it's positive anyway, right? That might be an exercise we could try. Our conclusions about what's going on in other people's heads are very rarely positive, are they? Which again, if that's a mirror that reveals how we think and how we live our lives, is maybe something we should think about. Judgment is not the fruit of the Spirit. It's fruit of fear, a lack of a low self-worth, anger, a lack of being loved and feeling loved. Now, if we fully embrace God's love for us, we rarely find ourselves judging. Now, if we fully embrace God's love for us, I think we would never find ourselves judging. But judgment comes from this doubt, this insecurity, this need to protect and self-preserve. So, I don't know, I'm gonna finish there. I just wanted to give you some thoughts on this and just dialogue with you some of the thoughts that I've had on this and the journey that I've been on. You know, this has changed my life drastically. You know, my day-to-day friendships and stuff, we've got a great community where I am in England, and it's amazing how quick we are to encourage each other and go, you're judging. we'll be talking with each other and just, oh man, this happened the other day and it's really annoying, and I just think that the person, no, you're judging. Anytime you say, I think the person, no, you're judging them. If you're presuming to think what they think, no, that's judgment. We should stop the conversation there. What actually happened? What was the observation? Do you need more information on that? Okay, get on the phone and call them. Otherwise, we're done here. We're not going to create a whole world in our conversations as well, because we're bad at it as a group, right? We gossip, we slander, we do all sorts of crazy stuff based on our judgment. Like that's what the prayer chain is half the time, right? So you guys have a prayer chain? Phone one to the other, to the other, to the other? No? I don't know if that's, there you go, that's maybe a bit old school, but whatever. But I'd love if I could have instilled something in you is for you to be evaluating, am I judging? Because I'm sure most of us in this room are judging someone at some point, and have done maybe this week, today. It's midday, you probably judge someone by now, I'm sure. I might judge a few people when I'm preaching this message, you know? So, it creates a world where we live, and that world is not a good place to live. It's a prison. Because it's not real. And it's not fun, because all of our presumptions of judgment are not good. It's not positive judgment, right? I'd love for you guys to go in and evaluate that. Think about it. Think about your partner, your colleagues, your friends, whatever it is, like, and think, is there something going on with any of these relationships where I've actually stepped into judgment and I'm actually hurting for it? That actually, if I stop and evaluate it, there's something in one of these relationships that's actually causing me hurt or pain, or 12 of these relationships, I don't know. You're getting like me, I had basically every relationship on some level, I had some judgment somewhere. How can I fix that? Can I go and sit down with my brother that I've fallen out with? Or talk to my spouse about that thing that she said last week and I got really upset about, and I've been mulling it over for weeks and create this whole big thing. I can sit down and talk and they'll go, oh, I didn't even realize I said that. I wasn't even thinking about it. But not only that, I'd love to come back again next year or whenever I come back again and see community that encourages one another to step out of judgment. You know, like what I have with my friends, my peers back home, that thing of, hey, you're judging. When your mate comes around to talk about that thing that happened and they're going, oh, and this and this and this, you go, hey, I think you're judging. What actually happened? And help them split the two apart. Because let's be honest, doing this on our own is not easy, right? Because we're so in our heads. At times we relive things and we relive it. Actually, once we've thought it over for a day or so, we can't even tell the difference between what actually happened and our judgment, right? We create a whole new memory, right? So in my memory of the pastor, he probably kicked me as he walked by, you know, he's like, I hate you, you know, like, right? Not quite, but I've thought about it so much, right? If I allowed that a few more days, right, and you come to get me at the end of the service, right? But we kind of do that, don't we? And then we talk to, like, you know, you talk to your spouse about something they said a week ago, and you've been mulling it over, and, you know, he was so mean, and then you actually talk to him, and he's like, oh, I just said this, and you're like, oh, yeah, maybe you did actually, right? And you've created it to this whole big thing, right? What if, as a body, as a family, we called each other on that? We helped each other with that. We went, hey, actually, what happened? Did that actually happen? Did you actually say that? Or is that something that you created up here? Let me pray for you guys. Father, I'm so thankful, Father, that you do not judge. And that you sent Jesus to show us what you are like. And he said, I don't judge either. God, that you're not a God of judgment. You're not a God of creating false realities and living in them. But you love healthy relationship. You love living in the moment. Help us to do the same. Help us to live now. Help us to live in relationship with each other, that we would hold each other to a high standard, absolutely, that we would value our relationships highly, that we would invest in our relationships to a very high degree. But help us not judge others in those relationships. Help us not climb into other people's heads and presume to know what they're thinking. Help us not presume to know the motives of another God. But instead, help us to take each other at our words. Help us all be clear communicators. Absolutely. Let us ask for others to communicate clearly what they mean, but may we actually do that as well. May we be known as people that speak clearly what we say. Our yes is our yes, our no is our no. If we're not fine, we don't say we're fine. Help us communicate clearly. And help us be quick if we need more information to ask for it, rather than trying to fill the gaps ourselves. Father, help us, just help us see the grace we have in this journey as well. To know that, God, you give us grace, you extend grace, that in the midst of struggling in this, and when we drop the ball, we do jump into judgment, and we fall back to old ways, or anything like that, Lord. Just help us realize we have a grace for that. It's easy to pick ourselves back up and get back on the horse. God, help us keep our eyes fixed on you. That we would walk in your ways, Lord. That we would be a people of love, of grace, of acceptance, of mercy. That we would always extend the benefit of the doubt. Help us remember that others don't think the way we think. Help us not to presume that. Just be overflowing with grace for others in our relationships with each other. Amen. Thanks so much, guys. I appreciate you guys letting me share a bit. If you want to connect with me, I don't know, again, some of you guys haven't heard me speak before, so I don't know if you followed me online or even come across any of that. You can connect with me on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Snapchat, my website, phildrysdale.com, all that good stuff. Please do connect, stay in touch. I'd love that. I usually have a sign-up list for emails. I send out every week, but I don't have that with me. But you can, again, if you go on my website, you can sign up for that. They're good, great. I agree with everything in them. For the first day or so, and then I regret something. But yeah, no, it's really good to be with you guys. I think we're going to hang around for a little bit anyway. And if you want to chat, thanks. But yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Phil. It was a practical message. It was beautiful. It was awesome. If anybody needs prayer for this specific thing, maybe you're going through something and it's just been like eating at you and eating you, and